Can I also have Ibrahim Adjabo from Gambia? Can I have Bernadette Zuma from Kenya? And can I have Tochukwu Kivalu from Togo? Also, I'm supposed to invite the representative of school. I don't know who's representing, is it the director or Mrs. Amadi? Okay. May I kindly introduce the director of the Special Control Unit Against Money Laundering. He's going to be presenting a paper for us this afternoon at this session. Once he presents the paper, then we're going to be discussing it with the panelists. Mr. Harry Erin is the Director, Special Control Unit Against Money Laundering in Nigeria. Mr. Harry, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Harry Erin, and today I'm going to be discussing Nigeria's transition from non-compliance to compliance of FATF Recommendation 8, the journey so far. I would like to stand on the already established protocols. Introduction. The Financial Action Task Force Recommendation 8 requires countries to adopt a targeted, proportionate, and risk-based approach to protecting the non-profit organization sector from terrorist financing abuse, while safeguarding legitimate charitable and humanitarian activities. The revised recommendation recognizes that only a subset of NPOs may be vulnerable to terrorist financing abuse, and that regulatory measures must therefore be evidence-based and proportionate. Nigeria's journey towards effective implementation of Recommendation 8 has been one of significant reforms, institutional learning, and constructive partnership between government and civil society. It demonstrates how sustained political commitment, legislative reforms, interagency coordination, and meaningful stakeholder engagement can transform a country's AML-CFT framework while preserving civic space. Today, Nigeria's implementation of Recommendation 8 has been re-rated from non-compliant NC to compliant C, representing one of the country's most significant AML-CFT achievements and contributing to its eventual exit from the FATF grey list. Nigeria's initial approach to NPO supervision. Prior to the enactment of the Money Laundering Preventive and Prohibition Act 2022 and the Terrorist Prevention and Prohibition Act 2022, Nigeria regulated NPOs as a subset of designated non-financial businesses and professions under the supervisory mandates of SCUMO. This approach subjected virtually all NPOs to the same AML-CFT obligations applicable to all DNFPPs. While well-intentioned, it did not distinguish between higher risk and lower risk organizations, and therefore did not fully align with the risk-based philosophy underpinning FATF Recommendation 8. Although Nigeria has undertaken several initiatives, including typology studies, national risk assessments, engagement with civil society organizations, development of guidance notes, and outreach programs, these efforts had not culminated in a comprehensive assessment of terrorist financing risk specific to the NPO sector. So these findings of the second round mutual evaluation. During Nigeria's second round mutual evaluation conducted by GIABA and FATF, assessors identified several fundamental deficiencies in Nigeria's implementation of Recommendation 8. The assessment concluded that Nigeria had not undertaken a comprehensive risk assessment of the NPO sector. 2, had failed to identify the characteristics of NPOs vulnerable to terrorist financing abuse. 3, had not categorized NPOs according to risk. 4, had not applied AML-CFT or had applied AML-CFT obligation indiscriminately to all MPOs without a risk basis, and finally, that it lacked evidence to support the risk factors contained in its supervisory guidance. The assessment specifically observed that classifying all MPOs as DNLDPs and subjecting them without discrimination to the full suite of AML-CFT responsibilities is not a substitute for this exercise and goes against the intent of Recommendation 8. Consequently, FATF rated Nigeria non-compliant with Recommendation 8. The shortcomings also affected the immediate outcome 10, where assessors observed that Nigeria's supervisory framework was overly broad and disproportionate, potentially discouraging legitimate charitable activities. They further noted that significant differences between the government and civil society's understanding of terrorist financing risk, particularly regarding humanitarian organizations operating in the northeast of Nigeria. These deficiencies became one of the strategic issues contributing to Nigeria's placement under the FATF Enhanced Follow-up Process, which is also known as the Grey List, in 2023. Now, the journey from criticism to reform. Nigeria responded to these findings with remarkable speed and determination, recognizing that Recommendation 8 extends beyond regulation and effective partnership with civil society. The federal government mobilized political commitment at the highest level. This commitment resulted in a comprehensive program of legal, institutional, and operational reforms. Among the most significant reforms were the enactment of the Money Laundering Prevention and Prohibition Act 2022, the enactment of the Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Act 2022, the establishment of stronger institutional coordination amongst competent authorities, enhanced collaboration between government agencies and the NPO sector, development of a framework for risk-based supervision of NPOs. These reforms shifted Nigeria away from rules-based compliance model towards a genuinely risk-based supervisory framework. Perhaps the most transformative reform was the conduct of Nigeria's first standalone terrorist risk assessment of the NPO sector. Unlike previous assessments, this exercise adopted an inclusive and participatory approach. Government agencies, regulators, security agencies, financial intelligence authorities, international development partners, and civil society organizations jointly participated throughout the assessment process. The assessment enabled Nigeria to 1. Identify the subset of NPOs vulnerable to terrorist financing abuse. 2. Understand the methods through which terrorist organizations may exploit charitable activities. 3. Distinguish between higher risk and lower risk organizations. 4. Develop evidence-based risk indicators. 5. Establish proportionate supervisory measures. And 6. Strengthen mutual trust between regulators and the NPO community. Most importantly, this exercise addressed one of the principal deficiencies identified during the mutual evaluation. Now, building trust through stakeholder engagements. One of Nigeria's greatest lessons has been the realization that effective implementation of Recommendation 8 cannot succeed without trust. From the masterclass of yesterday and to some of the speakers today, I think this point has been heavily stressed and emphasized. Rather than treating NPOs merely as regulated entities, SCUMOL adopted a partnership approach that emphasized dialogue, transparency, and shared ownership of reforms. This collaboration resulted in improved understanding of terrorism financing risk, reduced mistrust between regulators and the civil society. It was more practical because regulatory experiences were shared with the civil society. The development of the EFCC Anti-Money Laundering, Combating of Financing Terrorism, and Counter-Proliferation Financing for Non-Profit Organization Regulation 2023 was itself the product of extensive stakeholder consultation that reflects this collaborative approach. Because as a result of all those laws and amendments, it was clear that there was need for a regulation that guided the activities of SCUMO, and that was the regulation that was passed in 2023. Implementing risk-based supervision. Now we are coming to where we are right now. Following the completion of the risk assessment, SCUMO fundamentally redesigned its supervisory strategy. Supervision is now driven by assessed risk rather than blanket regulatory requirements. This has enabled supervisory resources to focus on NPOs assessed as being more vulnerable to terrorist financing, abuse, while reducing unnecessary regulatory burdens on lower risk organizations. SCUMO has completed this framework with sustained awareness programs, targeted compliance outreach, continuous engagement with humanitarian organizations, capacity building initiative, risk-based monitoring, and strengthened collaboration with domestic and international partners. This approach better balances the need to protect the NPO sector from terrorist abuse while preserving legitimate charitable and humanitarian work. We're rounding up right now. International recognition. Nigeria's reform did not go unnoticed. The country's implementation approach was recognized in the FATF Best Practices on Combating the Abuse of Non-Profit Organization Recommendation 8, which highlighted the importance of stakeholder engagement, risk-based supervision, and proportionate regulatory measures. This particular one, it was published in the FATF Best Practices Manual, and Nigeria was highlighted. Gina, you're smiling. Yeah, we all know what we went through to get there. Ultimately, the cumulative impact of legislative reforms, political commitment, interagency coordination, comprehensive risk assessment, stakeholder engagement, and effective implementation resulted in Nigeria being re-rated compliant with Recommendation 8. This is a very good place to clap. This achievement also contributed significantly to Nigeria's eventual removal from the FATF grades. Lessons learned. As I wrap up now, Nigeria's experience offers several important lessons for other jurisdictions. Political commitment is indispensable for implementing complex AML/CFT reforms. Comprehensive risk assessments provide the foundation for effective Recommendation 8 implementation. Trust between regulators and civil society is as important as regulation itself. Effective supervision must be proportionate, evidence-based, and risk-focused. Legislative reforms must be supported by operational implementation. Continuous stakeholder engagement produces better regulatory outcomes than enforcement alone. Protecting the civic space and protecting the financial system are complementary objectives rather than competing ones. Conclusion. Nigeria's transition from non-compliance to compliance on FATF Recommendation 8 illustrates that effective implementation is not achieved through stricter regulation alone. Rather, through evidence-based policy-making, sustained political will, meaningful stakeholder engagement, and proportionate risk-based supervision. While important progress has been made, journey continues. Terrorist financing risks continue to evolve, requiring continuous assessment, adaptation, and collaboration. Nigeria remains committed to strengthening its partnership with the NPO sector, ensuring that legitimate charitable organizations can continue their invaluable humanitarian work while safeguarding the sector from abuse by terrorists. The Nigerian experience demonstrates that Recommendation 8 is best implemented not through restricting the civic space, but through building trust and strengthening resilience of the government and the civil society. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Nigeria. We're excited and happy to hear all the reforms that you've undertaken to have reached the milestone you have. This is very, very, I think, it's an important milestone that Nigeria has actually taken or has attained. And we're very excited for that, and we're happy to note that Nigeria has undertaken all the measures or has addressed all the outstanding measures in order to attain Recommendation 8. So we thank you very much. Coming from that, flowing from that, I can understand that Nigeria has actually started from non-compliance to compliance, as Harry's paper has just told us. It means that we're at a very, very delicate intersection where we're talking about security, governance, and civic space. And we can learn a lot from Nigeria's achievements. One key thing I took away from this paper is the fact that you cannot continue to regulate MPOs within the stricter measures or within the old recommendation. There has always been a misconception to think that they can be categorized in the same, let me say, regulation. However, with the amendment of the law, Nigeria has taken the measures, to amend its legislation first and foremost to ensure that the MPOs that were previously considered or regulated as, I'm sorry, my attention has been drawn. We are missing one panelist, and I'm sorry for that. I apologize completely. And I would like to use this opportunity at this junction to invite our Ghanaian representative in the name of Felix Luga. Please, a round of applause for him. So sorry about that. Welcome. Well, sorry, Mr. Felix, for that. Sorry for that oversight. I apologize once again. So it's interesting to know that legislative measures have been taken, political will has been committed, institutional measures have also taken place, and most importantly, the collaborative effort between the government and the civil society. I think that is very, very important, and that is one key thing I have taken away from Harry's paper. Flowing from that, I would like to raise my question also to Tunisia. From the impact or the success that Nigeria has recorded, I would say that the legal and institutional framework or the legal and institutional environment within which Nigeria and Tunisia operate may differ. Yet, Tunisia, we're happy to note also that Tunisia has attained full compliance rating with Recommendation 8. What aspects of your reform journey do you believe are universally applicable regardless of any country's legal or institutional perspective? How do you think others can learn? What did you do differently? Can you share your experience on that? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to talk a little bit about the Tunisian experience. First, we got the compliant rating back in 2019, 2020. And Tunisia was one of the very first developing countries that got this rating. When we got the compliant on Recommendation 8, only 4 or 5 countries were compliant: US, Canada, the UK, and Australia, if I'm not mistaken. So Tunisia, a developing country, facing actually the threat of terrorism, shaky environment because of the political transition, and yet we succeeded in in this assessment and get the compliant rating. It was mainly, if not solely, done because of this intersection between civil society, knowledgeable about all of this dynamic, about the subject, and part of the authorities that got convinced that if they work collaboratively with civil society, with NPOs, they might improve the rating. This is the kind of the intersection that helped the Tunisian case back in 2019, 2020. Back then, Tunisia was going through a democratic transition phase, and this intersection of elements made it possible. And I have to add to it the international expertise. I have to say that back then, Tunisian civil society was not, yes, it was knowledgeable about this issue of the impact of Recommendation 8 on civic space, but we did not have the proper tool, the proper expertise to support the government action. So we called on expertise from international partners. I name Human Security Collective, ICNL, and Greenacre back then. We made this kind of collective expertise come to Tunisia, and we had this very, I would call it, beautiful experience back in 1920. And after this effort, the assessors or the assessment of Tunisia was on compliant on Recommendation 8. That was back then, 5 years ago. Unfortunately, Tunisia now is moving away from democratic transition. And we had our assessment, following round of assessment in January 2026. And unfortunately, the government and the authorities did not accept to renew the experience. They've done the assessment without consultation or without collaboration with civil society. We don't have yet the report presented, but it looks like we may not keep the compliant rating. We might, we don't know yet. It's unfortunate because we had the successful experience. We knew how to stay compliant, how to be compliant, and yet the government and the competent authorities choose not to collaborate, not to renew the experience. So I think my lesson is, yes, collaboration is very important, but it is also very important to try to find a way to cement this collaboration, to make it last. It's not a one-time shot, because the assessors will come after 4 or 5 years from when you move to compliant or to partially compliant, and they might punish you for not renewing your own successful experience.
Thank you. It's interesting to know that Tunisia attained its own compliance rating at a very, very early stage, 2019, 2020, even when globally only not more than perhaps 5 countries had attained. So this is commendable. Please, can we give them a round of applause? Thank you, Tunisia. Thank you very much. If I may ask the Gambia, from what he has just said, from what Tunisia has just shared with us, he's talked about collaboration, he's also talked about seeking expertise in terms of their support on their operations. What would you tell us about Gambia, how you have been able to progress your implementation or your applicability of Recommendation 8? What key challenges have you faced in engaging with the civil society?
Thank you very much. For Gambia, we have made strides, of course. We have a regulation back in 2003 on AML CFT, and this was revised in 2012. That's the 2012 AML CFT Act in 2012, and that is what is there. But not long ago, like 2 years ago, the FIU came up with another bill. They call it the 2024 AML CFT bill, which is still going on, because we needed to make a lot of improvement after the first NRA, which was held around 2019-2020. So Gambia is progressing because we are trying to strengthen our frameworks in terms of AML CFT. Aside FIU, when it comes to the NPO sector, we are using Decree 81, but this decree is now being under repeal because we have a new NGO bill which seeks to repeal Decree 81, and I think that would help in improving our AML CFT laws. Of course, we have challenges because basically when it comes to governments in Africa, resources will always become a challenge. In my country is a small one actually, but we are constrained with resources when it comes to developing some of these frameworks, when it comes to outreach issues, because I could remember when we were doing the NRA, we had challenges of reaching out to NGOs, because we tried as much as possible to reach out to all the NGOs. We are different from Nigeria, which has probably many thousands of NGOs. In the Gambia is different. We have about 143 in our database, and then and few others that are directly under the Register of Companies. We are progressing.
Thank you. Thank you. Round of applause, please. Oh, interesting that you're on the process of amending your law, so the legal framework is being subjected to review, and I will say that is very key, in terms of achieving this recommendation 8. You have to have the legal framework that will support all the activities that are required to be done. Thank you very much for that. Burkina Faso, from the paper that was discussed earlier, we heard that Nigeria had to conduct a risk assessment of the NPO sector. How would you say your assessment of the risk of the sector has been? What is your experience? How has Burkina Faso been able to respond to such? Okay, sorry. Sorry, Kenya. My mistake, sorry.
Thank you very much. I think I'm truly African because my name tag reads Nigeria. So just to contextualize Kenya non-profit organization ecosystem and appreciating where we come from. Kenya, we have 4 different registration regimes for the non-profit organization. There's the subset that we call the non-profit organization, NGOs, transitioning to PBOs. We have a register of less than 10,000 active non-profit organizations in that subset. The other subset is registered under the Registrar of Companies and the Companies Act of 2015, and there are about 8,000 company limited by guarantee. And the other subset, we have the faith-based organization under the Registrar of Society under the AG's office. We have quite a number of the subset of the non-profit organization. Then we have the community-based organization, the small groups under the Community and Small Groups Act. And currently, because of the automation, there were about 6,000, but they only have a valid certification of 2 years. So they are about 19,000. When you look at the different registration regimes that we have, we don't have a big brother. But the law, which was actually operationalized last year in May, appointed the Public Benefit Organization Regulatory Authority to be the overseer and monitor non-profit organization for AML CFT in the nation. But the only thing that it didn't do, it did not repeal the existing registration, but gave the civil societies voluntary option to come and be conferred or be registered under the Public Benefit Organization Act. And that is where the Financial Action Task Force International Cooperation Review Group has an issue with Kenya, because they're saying is restricting, is actually putting pressure on them and asking us, in the event that a higher non-profit organization which has not transitioned to the PBO Act, what happens to that? And you are saying administratively we are forming a working group to say we are in a position to monitor and oversight the sector. The sector in Kenya contributes approximately 1% of Kenya GDP. And the Kenya GDP is about 136 billion USD, projecting a growth to 146 billion this year, 2026. So we are saying the sector contribution to GDP is 1.3 USD per year. So it is a sector to reckon with, and it is a very vibrant sector when you come to Kenya. So when the mutual evaluation was conducted and adopted in Isamlag, the FATF regional style body that we are a member of, we had 107 recommended action. And specifically for the non-profit organization, before then, none of the non-profit organization in Kenya was regulated, supervised, for terrorism financing. And we had not done any baseline for TF risk assessment in Kenya. And that is 2020, 2022 in September, when the Council of Ministers adopted the mutual evaluation for Kenya. So now we had to start from scratch. And when we were escalated to the FATF, and we were put on 1 year post-observation period before the grey listing, we actually decided to start gradual. We do our risk assessment. After we carry out the sectoral risk assessment, now they can progress and assess the non-profit organization who are at a higher risk of TF abuse. So we were starting from square one as Kenya. And I think in the process of that, we had Greenacre, the same consultant that helped Nigeria to carry out their sectoral risk assessment. And thereafter, I think there was a time we were grappling with issues to do with risk assessment, risk monitoring, and we had to call Victoria all the way from Niger to come and help us. And there was a team which came to NFIU here to just see how you guys are doing. So the best thing we've done is just collaborate. And the other aspect during our risk assessment was told the best methodology is to make sure that the official statistics from the government side, we, the government representative, will collect that data. And then the data from the civil society or the non-profit organization will be coordinated. The questionnaire will be deployed and administered by the civil society. And then we'll do proper analysis together, joint analysis for official data that we got in terms of if there's been any MLA, any conviction, any investigation in relation to non-profit organization, any suspicious transaction reports by our FIU, we were the one to analyze the data and share the data. So we started having that kind of conversation. And as we progress, now we say we've done the risk assessment, we've reviewed the measures. The next step is to come up with a risk-based framework and then just say, how do we go about it? What are the tools that we need to support the process? We developed a questionnaire to gather the data. We developed a CFT return together with the CSO in one room. And now we did the risk categorization of the higher risk non-profit organization in relation with our risk profile as a jurisdiction. And then we were able to assess the non-profit organization with the risk categorization were higher risk, and now in the process of monitoring the same. However, we have one challenge. The one subset that I had alluded to as I started the conversation, the faith-based organization registered and the registrar of companies, at that particular time, they have manual registers. And in Kenya, if you register as a non-profit organization, the certificate is a perpetual certification. It's not cancelled at some point. And they did not have a framework to monitor them. And hence, we were not able to access the data. We didn't have sight of the data to either profile them or to be in a position now to monitor them for TF. And that is the gap that we have, and that is why Kenya is still on the gray, and why Kenya has not really largely addressed the issues raised by the FATF ICRG action plan. So when I look at the Nigeria case study, and when I listen to the Gambia, as much as the Nigeria have more or less the same ecosystem, the advantage Nigeria has is like they have a supervisor, the SCUMO. At least the SCUMO kinda has the legal basis to monitor and supervise the non-profit organization collectively. Whereas in Kenya, there is a room for transition, and we are hoping by the time we close next year, we'll have everybody in one room so as we'll be able to supervise them. So the biggest challenge has actually been the legal framework within our jurisdiction, whereby we are not able to collectively, with authority, say, this one is a regulator for all subset or functional definition of FATF operating within the jurisdiction of Kenya. And I think the biggest challenge we've got as well is the capacity gap. The level of understanding, how is TF manifesting itself in the non-profit organization, and how can we create the awareness, and how do we build the capacity for all these relevant stakeholders, that is the government, that is the regulator itself. We remember before the mutual evaluation, we never monitored the non-profit organization for TF. So that means the regulator was not knowledgeable, and the sector was not knowledgeable, and the biggest challenge of them all was the lack of trust between the civil society and the government. And the civil society felt that the government is unfairly targeting them and they are coming in the guise of they're being abused for TF. I think those being the challenges we have, we've been in a position to overcome some of them, the political will, having enough budget and the capacity building, and then again the government allowing us to come to Niger to come and learn. So I think this has been the story for Kenya.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Kenya. Thank you for those wonderful measures that you have implemented. We can hear that Kenya has done a lot, from collaboration to risk assessment to identification of those entities at risk of TF abuse to, let me say, institutional reforms. And as much as the final one that I consider most important is the political will and the budgetary allocation. With that, I would like to invite Ghana to tell us what is your experience in terms of political will and the funding, necessary funding. How has Ghana been able to navigate that terrain, that space, and securing the political commitment and political will? Usually we say political will should be what followed up by political action. So we'd like to hear from Ghana, please.
Thank you very much. I thought you would still have to forget about me to the last end, but this is also good to jump over. For Ghana, yes, since the NRA was conducted, and then because that also was added to the grade list, so government will was actually enhanced or whipped up, of which the government has quickly set up structures to be able to regulate the sector. And then the definition, as even before then, NGOs have been registered actually within Department of Social Welfare and Labor Relations. But then it has been moved under Register of Companies, and so they are registered limited by guarantee, company limited by guarantee. So that involves even the religious, involve the humanitarian, also faith-based, as well as the education, those who are involved. So within that, government has made sure that even there is an inter-ministerial committee that sees to it that issue relating to NPOs, because so the name from NGO has changed to NPO, then the sector must come to understand what exactly that terms means and those who are within that bracket to work with. So government has established that, put in more support in terms of the funding, not enough, because with the support of some civil societies. So even to get into the next NRA, government together with some civil society, again, including spaces of change, we have to bring civil advisory hub down to come on our 6 and take the people through some capacity building to come this far. So as you limit to the government commitment, this is it. And government of Ghana is ready and supporting. Even as I speak to you now, we are within our the third round of the evaluation, which we will be ending by next month by processing. Government has actually been part and supporting. I mean, it will not be enough. Government resources will not come and do all, but with the support of civil society, we have come far in Ghana. So this is what I will say for now. Thank you.
Not that political will and political commitment is very, very important in success to the implementation of all the recommendations. And collaboration cannot be overemphasized as well. We have been talking about it all morning and this afternoon as well. Togo, I don't know, you're on already? All right. You fine? The translation, so that I take it easy. Are you with the headphones? Okay, you can hear. No problem. So from the discussion this afternoon, we have heard from Nigeria in terms of the processes they have had to undertake. We have heard about the institutional review, we have heard about the reforms, we've heard about the commitments, we've heard about even the operational measures that they have had to put in place for them to be able to attain compliance with Recommendation 8. How would you describe your experience within your country in terms of the measures that you are undergoing currently to attain such recommendation? What relevant support has the government been able to provide for your agency? And how have you been able to address your structural reforms? Thank you.
Ok, bon, je vais m'exprimer en français si ça ne me dérange pas. You can do it in French? Ok, merci Madame la modératrice. Par rapport aux réformes qui ont été effectuées au Togo pour atteindre la recommandation 8, pour avoir, disons, une notation conforme, bon, le Togo actuellement est en train de refaire une évaluation concernant les OBNL pour pouvoir détecter les OBNL à police. Donc, qui est financé par le Comité national de coordination de la LBC-FT au Togo. Donc, actuellement, nous sommes en train de faire une évaluation des risques concernant les OBNL pour classifier les OBNL selon leur niveau de risque. Donc, d'ici fin juillet, normalement, cette évaluation, on aura la diffusion de cette évaluation. Donc, actuellement également, nous sommes, pour pouvoir atteindre ce niveau de conformité, et le texte qui régissait la création d'associations et de sociétés de 1909 est actuellement en cours de révision. Donc, disons, précédemment, le Togo n'avait pas les autorités de contrôle pour les OBNL et le secteur des sociétés civiles. Actuellement, dans ce nouveau texte d'application, ce fait avant projet de loi, il a intégré une autorité qui sera désignée pour superviser les activités concernant les OBNL et le secteur des sociétés civiles. Donc, bon, actuellement, nous faisons un effort, disons, pour la première évaluation qui avait été faite concernant les OBNL n'était pas inclusive. Donc, ce qui a fait que le GIABA avait refusé, elle n'avait pas validé cette évaluation. Donc, actuellement, la nouvelle évaluation, elle est inclusive, elle concerne tous les secteurs, c'est-à-dire le ministère de l'administration territoriale, qui est en charge des OBNL et de la société civile. Ça concerne également les OBNL, que ce soit du sud du pays jusqu'au nord du pays. On a essayé de faire un travail avec toutes les OBNL qui se trouvent sur le territoire du pays. Donc, pour pouvoir trouver pour pouvoir évaluer le niveau de risque concernant ces OBNL. Donc, actuellement également, nous avons un cadre de coordination qui existe entre, disons, les OBNL et l'État. La CENTIF est là en tant que coordinateur pour pouvoir aider, disons, ces OBNL. Elle est comme un pouvoir de transmission entre ces OBNL et, disons, l'État. Concernant, bon, je pense que vous m'avez dit, oui, bon, je pense que comment les disons, pour dire, disons, pour pouvoir atteindre ce niveau de conformité, comme on le dit, comme je vous l'ai dit au début, nous avons une nouvelle évaluation qui a été faite, qui sera publiée, qui sera, disons, diffusée à tous les secteurs, les OBNL et la société civile, d'ici fin juillet. Nous avons mis également en place, disons, côté juridique pour que nous puissions retrouver, pour que tous les OBNL et les secteurs civils se retrouvent avec une autorité de supervision. Il y a les textes qui sont en cours de révision, disons, c'est dans le circuit politique actuellement. Comme on le sait très bien, disons en Afrique, le circuit politique, il est un peu lent. Les textes sont là, mais actuellement, c'est transmis à l'Assemblée. Donc, c'est à l'Assemblée de valider ces textes pour pouvoir mettre en place cette autorité de supervision des OBNL et du secteur privé. Donc, en gros, je disons, c'est ce que le Togo est en train de faire pour pouvoir atteindre la recommandation 8 et, disons, être conforme comme le Nigeria également dans ce domaine. Merci.
Thank you very much. We can see that all countries are working very hard to strengthen their AML CFT measures in order to attain compliance with Recommendation 8. Most importantly, we've understood today that political commitment is very key. We've also discussed the fact that resource is very important. We've discussed the fact that collaboration with the civil society is very key. We've talked about institutional strengthening. We've talked about legal measures where we have to amend our laws to reflect the understanding that those MPOs at risk are the ones that are supposed to be subjected to enhanced due diligence. Nigeria, I would like to just, I know that you have shared your experience, but particularly, one of the things I have noted since you started presentation is the fact that, let me say, collaboration has been part of your defining success in the whole of attaining the recommendation. What would you share? What would you like to share with other countries? What can they leverage on from your experience in terms of your collaboration with the civil society? Thank you.
Thank you very much, moderator. To correctly explain this, I would like to take us back to the last session that the women had. I think my colleague Binabo, she talked about how they went about with the collaboration. You know, at first, there was distrust between both parties. There was the gap where, you know, the issues were not fully understood between both parties. And what broke the ice? The two parties decided to listen to each other. But that was just one engagement. Such engagements are supposed to be sustained, and frameworks have to be built to support such systems. I remember I had a discussion with Madam Juliet Bekaku, who has been working, you know, a lot with the Nigerian Bar Association AML CFT committee. Now there's an issue coming up. The current executive there, they are leaving, and a new executive is coming in. You know, now they will have to start again, quote unquote, almost from the scratch. But if institutional frameworks are built such, you know, that guidelines are already there, regulations are already there, written down in stone, it's very easy for the new management or the new team coming in to just flow. So this is what I'll say. Engagement is important, but understand that we're talking about association, we are talking about governments. So it has to be sustained, and frameworks will have to be built. Consultative frameworks have to be built, collaborative frameworks have to be built to sustain such discussions. And for us, we try to meet the key actors. I think yesterday in one of the master classes, we're talking about the champions. There has to be champions. The MPO space is such that that particular ecosystem, you can't find just one body, a self-regulatory body that you can engage with. Like in Nigeria, the space, we have over 100,000 NPOs. So what do? So there are some, they are in groups of 5,000 NPOs, they are in one particular body. So what do? You have to find measures in which you can engage with them. You engage with these champions, I mean, you bring them together on the same roof. And then if you can have, you know, frameworks where maybe quarterly you meet with them, so you deepen this engagement. Outreaches are good, yes, you know, and then you engage them in such a way that it's not only when you invite them. When they are involved in anything too, they invite you. So this is one way in which you can go about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigeria. We're always happy to hear from you. Tunisia, if you may share with us, what would you consider if you were to start this process all over again, what would you do differently? In 2 minutes, please.
Actually, we are doing it all over again, and we are not successfully doing it.
What would you do differently to get it right?
Well, there is a word that has been mentioned quite a lot of time: political will. Political will is important, and it should not be a political will from the state just to get the compliant. It should be a genuine political will to open a space for civil society. To be compliant, yes, but also to believe and to open the space for civil society. And this is, sometimes it is a little bit hard, at least in my region, North Africa and West Asia, the Arab region, which is a region of, let's say, very, how would I put it, the least democratic region, I would say. So this political will is not very present in the region. Once we had it in 2019, 2020, it seems that we are losing it little by little now. So we have to keep on a genuine political, pushing for a genuine political will.
So political will that must be matched by political action. And political action should be matched by what? Adequate financing. Because I believe that is key. That is very important. Gambia, what do you say in 2 minutes? Give us your own overview in 2 minutes of what you will do differently in attaining Recommendation 8. What is that single challenge that has been hindering the country from, attaining Recommendation 8?
That's a very, very difficult question for me to answer. I think in the Gambia, we have the political will, to be honest with you. The political will is there, and we have also enhanced, the government has enhanced the capacity of the FIU. It has also enhanced the capacity of so many regulatory, most especially CBG as well, because the NPO sector are also having that free space, you know what I mean, to do whatever they want to do. Of course, on the regulations that are not very, very strict per se to affect their operation. However, in the Gambia, I think we need to learn from Nigeria. I was taking note of some of the things that they have put in place, and I have strong belief that our country should be able to with little support, I should say, should be able to come up with those frameworks to be able to attend the conference.
Thank you very much. Kenya, in 2 minutes, you talked about challenges with your structure in terms of supervisory framework. You talked about the Nigerian system and you're wishing you could have that. What would be your practical advice to the authorities in how to go about changing the structure or institutionalizing the structure?
Thank you very much. I think how we'll do it better this time around, because I think you can still have the different registration regimes still working. I think the first thing to do, and I think the challenge we had was a panic. You have 1 year post-observation period, and you need to close so many gaps. And it was not feasible within that time to close all the gaps that were there. And we didn't have time for buying, we didn't have time to have conversation, because even if the registrar is manual, if you have buy-ins, they will pull the data and avail the data in due time, because you're only looking for a representative sample for you to be in a position to profile their particular entity. So I think the first things first is, I don't know how we will quit panicking the 1 year post-observation period, but I think we need that preparation. The first thing to do is just having the buy-in before we decide to change the law, and then just coming up with a clear roadmap of the intended result. And I think the previous speaker said she did all the manner of games, and I think we become all footballers. And to the Spain's fan, it is the brilliance of the team that got them winning, and I think the brilliance of the team working together is what will get us winning. Having a roadmap with all the relevant registrars, with all the relevant players in the room, and agreeing to the intended results.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry about that, we are out of time. Ghana, yes. You talked about resource allocation. Can you tell us exactly what advice would you give in terms of maximizing limited resources while aiming to achieve compliance?
Thank you.
How do you maximize? Yes.
In 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Okay.
Just a point. What's the best advice?
The point can be only 1 minute, so but I'll finish. Thank you. So for us as a regulator, let me just say this, that we should also see ourselves that as we come in as CSO, we want to complement the activities of government. So government established all these other outfits to be able to help us. So we can seek advice at the agencies, at the secretariat, at the ministry that are established also to work with us as we collaborate. And that's one thing that we're saying earlier. You can see the narration that given how the intake of things before even the consensus was built. Then also, I said this again at masterclass yesterday, because some of us are itching for funding. When the funding moves this way, then we want to follow the funding. So we shift from our focus and our thematic areas. That brings also problem to us because your regulator and government want you to be this, but you are appearing to be this. That's also another thing that we need to look at. Then also the big CSOs, the big MPOs, please, as much as you are guiding the small ones, get them to know what the rudiments are. They must put their structures in place first and foremost so that they can deal for the funding and the support they will get.
Thank you.
On the aspect, no, I will not end, I will continue to finish. Yesterday, on the aspect of it, it means that in the collaboration, we should be looking forward to build a team, because together you'll be able to win, and an individual you feel like. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have learned today that to maximize resources, you should institutionalize a framework. Thank you very much. And as the last one, Togo, I would love to understand that what is that single measure you will take to accelerate your journey towards attainment of Recommendation 8?
Ok, merci Madame la Présidente. Bon, pour pouvoir atteindre, disons, la conformité, le Togo est, disons, en bonne marche déjà avec les différentes formations qui sont faites à l'endroit des OBNL et du secteur des sociétés civiles qui ont été faites. Donc, on a même eu une formation qui a été faite par le Space for 4 en collaboration avec le WANEP au Togo au mois de mars, pour pouvoir permettre aux acteurs de la société civile de connaître leurs obligations en matière de lutte contre le blanchiment de capitaux et financement du terrorisme. Donc, ce que nous souhaitons à ce jour, c'est que, disons, comme on l'a dit, la volonté politique qui soit, en votant la nouvelle loi qui est là pour pouvoir régir le domaine des sociétés civiles. Parce que l'ancienne loi qui était là, c'est celle de 1901, qui ne correspondait pas avec les exigences de la recommandation 8. Donc on espère que la volonté politique puisse déjà voter cette nouvelle loi qui va permettre de mettre en place les autorités de contrôle de ces OBNL du secteur de la société civile pour nous permettre d'avoir, disons, une conformité lors de notre présentation de notre rapport de suivi. Merci.
Thank you very much. Political will, political action keeps coming up over and over and over again. So we need that political commitment. And we have had all afternoon that to attain Recommendation 8, it's not about regulating more, but what? Regulating smarter. So I think we all need to take away that we need to understand, we need to identify MPOs at risk, and we need to apply measures that are what? That are proportionate and attainable. Now, I know we have come to an end and our time is up, but in closing, I just want Nigeria to give us a summary of its own experience, given that it has been operating in a conflict-affected region. How did your reforms ensure that the counterterrorism measures remained targeted, proportionate, rather than becoming unnecessarily restrictive? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I think it will be a good learning experience.
Yes. Everything flows, first of all, from the national risk assessment. And of course, we told you the innovation we brought, which was the National Terrorist Financing Risk Assessment that was done specifically for non-profit organizations. Now, we contextualize the particular risks involved. And we found out, just like from the recommendation 8 itself, that we should target at-risk MPOs. Now, all of this was communicated to the MPO sector. This is what we are doing. And of course, we changed the approach. We brought them in. Even in the National Terrorist Risk Assessment, they were part of National Terrorism Financing Risk Assessment. They were also part of the process, which is what led to where we are today. Right now, Nigeria is updating the National Terrorist Financing Risk Assessment on MPOs right now. And I can tell you that the MPO is also involved. So that is where we are. So if we are going to sustain this, we need engagement from time to time. And the message has to get to the grassroots. That it's not all MPOs. Like you heard the FATF say, you have to desegregate, even the MPO sector, desegregate them. When you're looking at MPOs, trade associations, human rights associations, those are not the at-risk MPOs. Sometimes, from experience and from risk assessments, most at-risk MPOs are the ones that are dealing with humanitarian issues. And you have to contextualize it, but you can't assume it. It is from the risk assessment that all of this is gotten, and then from there, you take it further. Sectoral risk assessments, we give you the roadmap. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigeria. Effective regulation leads to effective application of the FATF Recommendation will lead you to effective supervision and monitoring of the MPO sector. We thank you very much for this afternoon.
Thank you so much.
I don't know if there are other questions before we take a picture.
We don't have so much time for questions because we have another plenary.
All right.
So
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We thank all the panelists.
Thank you.